Good morning, everyone. If you can all find a seat, please. Welcome to our PCA Support Group meeting today. I'm Roberta McKee Jackson, and I'm part of the Rare Dementia Support Team. I work as the Regional Support Group Facilitator. So we're very glad to have all of you here today. Some of you I know because I've been a member of the PCA Support Group for years. My husband had PCA. But we're very happy to see all of you here. A lot of faces that I know from previous meetings, but also a lot of new people. So welcome to everyone. Please feel free to mingle with other people that are here. If you have any questions or not sure what to do, come and talk to Seb or I, and we will, or Emma is around. I'm not sure where everybody is. Right, there's Emma waving her hand. Kira's in the back, who most of you will know also. Millie, there's some different people, so welcome. Just the ever popular fire and safety evacuation notices. I don't believe there are any alarms scheduled for today, so if we do hear a fire alarm, we just need to make sure that we go down the exits where the little green man signs are. You can look for staff people and we'll guide you. We go down the stairs and meet over in UCL and Gower Place. So feel free to get up and move around if you like. There's tea, coffee, water in the back. Few cookies and biscuits if you like that too. So again, welcome to everybody. We're really glad to have you here today.
And good morning from me as well. My name's Seb Crutch. It's lovely to see many friends and familiar faces and also some new folk who I've not met before. So I'm Seb, I'm one of the psychologists here and work with Roberta to lead this group. I've a couple of specific welcomes for me. Katrina is here somewhere. Katrina's going to, if you stand up for a moment, Katrina, really exciting. Next month we'll be starting a pilot project with Katrina and her colleagues at the UCL's Integrated Legal Advice Centre, which is a fantastic initiative where student lawyers, supervised by qualified lawyers like Katrina, offer advice and legal support to people. And we've set up, through their generosity, a pilot project involving the PCA Support Group and also our PPA Support Group. So we know in many of our meetings we've come across people with legal and aid and other related struggles and difficulties, and we're going to be testing this system of providing you with a little bit more support and expertise than we personally have. So Katrina will be talking a bit more about that just before lunch, and then running a little discussion group this afternoon if you'd like to find out more. And also, I believe we have been joined by some new friends who we've recently met who are ROVIs, Rehabilitation Officers for the Visually Impaired. I hope I've got the title correct. Would you guys mind standing? Thank you so much for coming. We met you guys and some of your colleagues at the conference in June, and I think we're going to be hearing a little bit more about your skill set at one of the future meetings, but it's great that you're here today to hear about this wonderful crowd of people. So thank you for coming. And also wanted to ask Michael Miller to stand just very briefly. Michael's a great friend, a dementia trainer, filmmaker, and much more besides. And Michael's going to be helping us with a little video project, which I'll tell you a bit more about just before lunchtime, trying to create resources to help communicate what PCA is like to different types of professionals, so you can get across to them more quickly what you need them to know at the beginning of an appointment or an assessment. So we'll be talking a bit more about that in the afternoon groups. I also just have one just brief mention is we're trialling a new, thanks to Charlie Harrison who's over there, and the rest of the fantastic AV team here from Wellcome, we're trialling a live streaming of this meeting onto YouTube. So in the past we've always recorded our meetings so that people who couldn't make it in person could find it and listen to the talks afterwards. We're trialing this new system because we think it might be much more effective, certainly a more efficient way of getting the videos of the meetings into a place where people can find them afterwards. The only real change is we can't edit them afterwards. So if you have any concerns about, you won't be appearing in the video because the camera's focused on the front, but obviously it's a question and answer session which is often most valuable, so your voice may be heard. So if you have any particular concerns about your voice being on the recording that will sit on YouTube and be linked to from our PCA website, then it may be that you choose perhaps to ask me or one of the other team your question in a more private setting later on. But really the only people who'd be listening in reality are other members of the PCA support group who couldn't make it along today. So I think that was, I had one personal plug, sorry. UCL have seen fit to make me a professor, which is very nice. Thank you. And very, very much the reason for that is because of all the research work and teaching work that we've been able to do over the past 10 years, largely thanks to you guys and previous and hopefully future members of this group. They always ask new professors to give a talk, and my talk's going to be on Monday the 10th of December, but sometime between 5 and 7 p.m. There's absolutely no obligation to come, but these things tend to be fairly dry affairs with lots of grey-haired academics sitting around with their jackets and elbow patches saying, oh, that's very interesting. And what I'd like to do is for them to realise how much of the ideas and the inspiration for much of the research work we do comes from the conversations we have in this group. So if you do feel able to come along and be a little cheering crowd for the support groups and to rebalance things a little bit so that the academics are reminded that the good ideas behind their research aren't often theirs to start with. They come from the people living with these conditions, then it'd be really, really nice to see you there. If you'd like to do that, feel free to drop me an email and I can show you some more details. That's enough from me for now. I'm going to now hand over to Emma, who's going to tell you about what we're discussing this morning and introduce Laurie. Thank you.
Lovely to see you all. One quick reminder that Roberta just asked me to make is that the toilets, we forgot to tell you where those are, very important. They're at the back of the room on the left-hand side. And I'm very happy to introduce Laurie Hayden today to talk to us about adapting activities. Laurie was a full-time carer for her husband John, who sadly passed away in June this year. They met nearly 40 years ago, working together in Los Angeles, and John had a degree in both physics and philosophy and was a computer architect. He was diagnosed with PCA in September 2014, and after his diagnosis, John and Laurie took part in lots of different projects supporting people with dementia and their families, and Laurie continues to be really involved in these sorts of projects and is now a trustee on the board of Arts for Dementia, and she's going to tell us a bit more about that. So thank you very much, Laurie, and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I see some familiar faces in the audience, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Laurie Hayden, as Emma said. I'm a trustee on the board of Arts for Dementia, but more importantly, I was a full-time carer for my husband, John Williamson. Sadly, John passed away 3 months ago in June. The French playwright Pierre Corneille said, "Grief can be calmed by telling your story." I am finding that this is very true. Looking back over the past few years, I realized that one of the most precious and surprising things was how much the arts played a part in enriching our lives during such a fragile and bittersweet time. As Emma said, John and I have been together 40 years. We met when we were working in Los Angeles. John was English. He had a degree in both philosophy and physics. All his life, he was very logical and precise. He built computer systems around the world, working at places such as Stanford University and Warner Brothers. Closer to home, he worked at the Public Records Office. In September 2014, John was diagnosed with PCA, the variant of Alzheimer's disease. He had just retired as his symptoms started to appear. It took nearly a year for John to be diagnosed, and when he was, we were shocked. We were shocked, we felt lost, we felt bewildered. The future we had planned had become a blank sheet. There is a saying, "Lose yourself in action, lest you wither in despair." I think that's what I did. In the beginning, it was all very well to be buried in the mounds of leaflets and legalities to read and attend to. This busyness helped numb the shock, at least mine. But as the realization of what was happening started to sink in, organizations such as Dementia Pathfinders, the Alzheimer's Society, the PCA Support Group, and our local care center were key in providing us with support and information. They not only helped us with the practical aspects of dealing with this, but gently encouraged us to take the brave steps to try out the various projects on offer for people with dementia and their families. John had loved music, especially loud rock music. He played cards in a mean game of chess. He read voraciously and he wrote beautifully. Even after retiring, he continued to be amazed by numbers in cyberspace and worked daily on the computer. John did not sing, he did not draw, he did not dance. As PCA progressed, John could no longer use the computer, or indeed do most anything regarding his day-to-day life. He could not read more than one line. He could not sign his name. He could not play cards or chess. He could not dress himself, play his music, operate the TV, or alas, write a grocery list. With all I had to do with my role as carer and keeping us well fed and watered, why on earth would I consider taking John to ballet class? He'd never even danced at a wedding. And how could someone consider giving pottery classes to someone with PCA? Well, as I said, by meeting others and being gently encouraged by people like Barbara Stevens at Dementia Pathfinders, we started tentatively by attending Singing for the Brain. I had intended to bring John to the first session and leave him alone and have an hour to myself, but out of curiosity I stayed. You know what? We both loved it. We both sang. It was inspiring to be surrounded by people like ourselves and supportive volunteers. After a few weeks, John started singing at home. We started to sing together. I would sing to him or with him nearly every day until the day he died. This all got instigated by the spark set off at Singing for the Brain. You won't believe this, but we took part in some amazing projects. I can't believe it myself. In addition to Singing for the Brain, we attended sensory sessions at Hampton Court Palace over the course of a whole summer. We took 6 months of ballet lessons at Ballet Rambert. We did 9 months of pottery lessons with clay for dementia at the Lambeth Palace Garden Museum. We attended Music for Life in Wimbledon. And for nearly a year, when weather permitted, we attended Positive Spin, cycling for people with dementia, held on Clapham Common. All of the above may have been advertised online or via leaflets, but alas, as you know, we don't have time as carers to sift through all the offerings on the internet or even read the posts sometimes. John and I learned about most of these projects after starting to be around others in our situation and sharing information and ideas. You know what? Suddenly the focus of our journey was not negative, but positive and enriching. Taking part in the arts was something we could do as a couple. As John did it more and more, it became routine. He felt safe in the environments created and felt as if he was normal. We both felt normal. We felt accepted, welcomed, safe, and sane. It may not have been easy to find about projects suitable and accessible for us, but you know, it was almost easier to find the projects than it was to get us there on the day. There are many stories of me arriving somewhere, only to find out that I still have slippers on. Or the day we arrived at ballet after walking from the bus in the rain, I was more soaked than John, as I had burst into floods of tears of exhaustion by the time I got us in the door by 10 a.m. One of my favorite memories is his classic, "Oh, I swear," when John and I had just arrived on a blustery winter's day at the Singing for the Brain. Everyone was sitting having a cup of tea drying off and settling down before we started. John looked especially dapper that day, and I was, alas, a bit disheveled. It had been a challenge that day to get us both washed, fed, dressed, and out the door. As I was handed a cup of tea and catching my breath, someone was by John's side having a chat with him. A college student asking if she could ask him a few questions. I let him get on with it and just sipped my tea, slipping into my own world for a few minutes, when I heard the student ask John, "How long has your wife had Alzheimer's?" I looked up, he smiled, and looked at me, and replied, "I'm not sure, I can't remember." During the course of these projects, I could see and feel a sense of community growing. For everyone, the instructor, the curator, the volunteers, the carers, the family members, and most especially the ones with dementia. Don't underestimate these volunteers and project leaders and the help and support it took to work with John. Many of them had been trained via Arts for Dementia's courses designed to help arts facilitators learn the best practice to run sessions such as these. For example, John may well have been sitting at the pottery wheel throwing a pot, but it had taken 3 volunteers to help him find the chair and sit properly, and 2 volunteers to help guide his hands onto the clay. It was magical to watch, as we could all feel his elation as he felt the wet clay spinning in his own palms. Because of his PCA especially, John was always blessed to have volunteers or instructor by his side. At Ballet Rambert, after noticing that John couldn't really see what the lead ballerina was asking the class to do, he was partnered with a lovely 6-foot ballerina of his own who worked by his side every week. He liked that very much, whether he was dancing or not. John may not have been able to see his cup of tea, but somehow he always noticed and appreciated a pretty gal. John got so much from these projects because it gave him a sense of control and a chance to feel that he could be himself without being judged or giving the wrong answer. It gave him a chance to connect with others. You could sense and feel his comfort and joy. We all could. Now I'm going to go off paper here and see how it goes. One of the most poignant stories that I could tell you is we went to Music for Life, which is sponsored, I believe, by Wigmore Hall. And about 10 couples, about 6 couples would get together every week, and a conductor would come, a flautist, someone who played the cello, we all got together, and in the middle of the circle would be instruments. And the carers and the people with dementia would get up and have an instrument in their hand and play with it. And what would happen is they would wait for John, or someone like John, to play the instrument, say it was a thumb piano from Africa, play it in his own way, and then the instrumentalists and musicians would play to what John was playing. It was lovely, and again, because you get used to the routine of going, they lost their inhibitions and just did it and took part. It was really wonderful. One afternoon, as we were all getting ready to leave after a 2-hour session, the cellist, Pavlos, said to John, "Would you like to try out the cello?" Now I thought, the cello is very big and it's quite expensive, but the last I saw, Pavlos was trying to put John on the chair, put the cello between his legs, and I went to say get our coats and have a cup of coffee. A few minutes later, I heard the most haunting music coming from the cello, and I thought, oh, Pavlos has changed his mind. And I turned, and Pavlos was standing next to me. We all turned around, and John was by himself with the cello. He'd play something, and then he'd look to see where the sound came from. He'd do it again, and he'd look it was like watching a baby bird or a child with a ball. Well, people came running. Oh, this is supposed to happen in week 12, or might not have happened. And what happened was all the musicians got their music instruments back out, and they all stood around John, unbeknownst to him, and they played to what he was playing. Well, that was wonderful. But a few days later, friends came to take John for a walk. They came home and said, "John keeps talking about he's been playing the cello." I said, "Really?" Because usually he doesn't remember the day before. And he talked for a few weeks about this cello, and one day he said, "You know what, Laurie, I'd like something for Christmas." And he's never in his life, Mr. Philosopher doesn't need presents, ever asked for anything. And he said, "I would like a Maserati and a cello for Christmas." Right. That was a year I thought, right, okay. Well, his friend from university that he lived with when he was 18 had been living in Los Angeles and heard that John had had Alzheimer's, and he came to visit us during this time. And I told him this story, and a few days later he called up and he said, "I've ordered a cello for John. What day will you be home? We're having it delivered." A cello arrived with a big blue bow. A very good cello arrived with a big blue bow. John was delighted. And when he said, "I'd like to get John a cello," I said, "But he doesn't play." He said he thinks he does, and that's what counts. And do you know what? Every day, or when someone came to visit, John would say, "That's my cello," and if I asked him to play for someone, he played. He might be playing the wood and not making any sound, but he had control, and he got this. Anyway, I'm going on. See, I'm going off the page. I'm sorry. But isn't that the most wonderful story? The cello has just gone back now. It was very hard to watch, see it. Attending these projects and taking part in the arts made a difference, further difference to our life with dementia as we continued these activities at home, including the cello. Instead of John shying away from these activities, they became part of his everyday life. I started to keep a bucket of colored pencils and drawing pads in the kitchen so that we would scribble with color whilst listening to the radio or John's favorite American storyteller, Garrison Keillor, on a CD. If friends came round, I kept these activities up and included them in a crossword over a cup of tea or even drawing with us. John always loved it, and he felt safe and included, and again, it was part of a routine. We started to attend local pub quizzes with friends. John may not have remembered the answers, but was happy to be part of the team and sip a beer whilst we all tried to answer. Since John and I were getting used to the routine of getting up and going out, I extended our outings to attending museums, exhibitions, theater, and ballet. I started to realize how good it was to seize a few hours of our energy to focus on something wonderful. Even if we only looked at a few paintings at the Tate or had to leave the ballet at the interval, the experience and time we had together was so precious. I'm sure you all know, and if you don't, I hope you'll look into this, that there are wonderful accessibility discounts given to people and carers in the arts. Most theaters will give carers tickets free, but some places like the Royal Opera House go a step further. At the Royal Opera House, you can apply, and you can buy the best seats, and the carer's ticket is not only free, but the other ticket is at least 50% reduced. That's 75% off the price. The Albert Hall gives free seats for the carer and has special boxes that are next to the stage, with no steps involved. Museums will also let carers go into exhibitions free. They are all very helpful. John got so used to this, you have to be careful, John got so used to this that, and connecting and being part of things, that if we sat behind the conductor at the Albert Hall, Alfie Boe was singing one time and John started to conduct. Yes, oh my God. And he didn't seem a bit flustered when I took him to Alice in Wonderland last Christmas, and he was surrounded by little girls all dressed as Alice. He didn't think that was unusual at all. Great, great, great fun. John's PCA made us closer than ever before. I touched John's arm often to guide him. We were content to sit on the couch or a park bench and just be in the moment. We held hands. We did this not just for guidance, but for the affirmation of love and assurance that we were together on this journey of ours. I'm thrilled and delighted to let you know that last week, the John Gregory Williamson Memorial Award was announced. It is on the Dementia Pathfinders website with all the background and details. The award will be given to the most outstanding project within any London borough that has enriched the life of someone with dementia and their families. Nominations are now open, and a short list will be drawn up in March. The £500 award will be given out at the annual Dementia Pathfinders event in July. We have hard copies here for you to take away. Please nominate, and don't hesitate to nominate, a project that has enriched your journey. The arts made such a difference to our lives during such a fragile and surreal time. It gave us the gift of time to be together and connect with others. I'd say that the key to our happiness and to my own survival during that time was learning to live in the moment, not thinking of the past or the future, only the present. And learning that there are people out there, wonderful people that are doing research and there to support us on our journey. I'm sure you all have stories to share. I'd like to hear them. Thank you for listening to a few of mine.
Thank you, Laurie. Well, I was going to say for introducing this topic, but it feels like you did much more than that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. I'm not going to take up too much time now. I was just going to give you a bit of context. So the reason that we thought a talk around or a discussion around adapting activities would be useful is because people have mentioned this to us in a number of different contexts, research contexts and support group settings. And it felt like this kind of culminated a couple of months ago when I was presenting some research findings to a support group, and someone stopped me in the middle of my presentation and said, this is all very interesting, but we really struggle to know what to do day to day. So we know, obviously, that PCA makes lots of day-to-day things very difficult, and we know that it also starts at a time in people's lives when they're used to being very busy and having lots to do. So we shared some findings from our home-based research back at the conference in June, which some of you will have been at, and I just wanted to recap some of those slides now to frame this conversation that we're about to have. So we talked about how visual aids and adaptations might be used to support daily activities. So this was some coloured stickers on a microwave in the order of traffic lights to help this lady use the microwave. Also these raised brightly coloured buttons to make the buttons you need on the hi-fi system stand out. We also talked about how technology can help. Here's the Amazon Echo, which you will have heard a lot about in the support group, I'm sure. And things like remote controls that can be adjusted, so you only need to see the buttons that you need to be able to use. And in terms of the sorts of things that people want to be doing day to day, we heard from people who are now doing new things since their diagnosis of PCA. So one of our participants who used to untangle masses of wires as part of his job as a sound system installer was having trouble with that because of his PCA, but could see objects in isolation quite clearly, and he'd started picking up leaves from the garden and driveway, and said to me, I just find it so satisfying to do something hands-on and that I can see the results of what I'm doing. And other people spoke to us about how they're doing the same things as they've always done, but in new ways. So one lady was telling me that how when she plants seeds now, she marks them with drinking straws so that she can see more easily where she's planted them, she doesn't squash them or double up. And so there were lots of strategies and answers shared with us as part of this research, but there were also lots of questions, as I'm sure lots of you have lots of questions. And one family member summed this up really nicely, I thought, when she said of her and her husband. She said, we feel like the vultures in the Jungle Book. We're sitting next to each other, one of us saying, what are we going to do? And the other one saying, I don't know, what do you think we should do? And the other one says, well, I don't know, what do you think? So I'm sure some of you here today have suggestions, some of you have questions, and we thought this is a topic really where the expertise are in the room, and maybe the most useful thing we can do is facilitate some of that conversation. And we also have Millie. Where's Millie? Millie's here taking minutes, so we hope to capture some of what's said today, and we'll circulate it to you all, so you don't need to be scribbling things down. And to people who haven't been able to make it here today, and it would be great if you go away with a list of a few ideas of things to try, or maybe you contribute to something to someone else's list. So Seb and I will facilitate the conversation now. There's just a reminder on the screen of some of the questions we sent around to you in advance to think about. And yeah, so the floor is open. If I think Roberta and Hannah have some mics and are going to come round to you. Thanks, Roberta.
Shall I just read the questions out loud?
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So, the questions that we asked you to think about were: which sorts of activities have become difficult and why? Have you developed any strategies or workarounds to overcome these? Have you taken up any new activities since having a diagnosis of PCA? And is there anything you'd like help to be able to continue to do?
So it's a question on behalf of my father, who, in fact, he's not here today, but he had to give up golf, which is his favourite hobby, when he got PCA. In fact, it was one of the reasons he knew something was wrong, because he couldn't see the golf ball to play anymore, and his handicap went sort of off the scale. So he can't play golf now, and he's really upset about that. And he finds it difficult to know of a sport that he could do, certainly a team sport or anything like that, because it's difficult for seeing the ball and those sorts of things. And I wondered if anybody had any ideas or suggestions for that sort of thing.
What is this?
I have a similar problem. I've been going around the tennis ball in the air to try and recalibrate my hand-eye coordination. And it's working, you know, so I started bouncing it, because that's easier, and then I started throwing it up. I'll let you know how it goes.
Thank you. I'm a rehabilitation officer for people with sight loss, so working with people with significant sight loss and registration of partial sight and severe sight impairment. Within our job role, we do signpost people to various sporting organisations in and around London. Organisations like Metro Blind Sports, who have got a large amount of activities ranging from, there's also the Blind Golf Association, so which is available to anyone to join, but also there is things like the tandem riding that is in London that run by British Cycling. There's also goalball teams, which is a specific visual impairment sport, but it's open to anyone. So whether you're sighted, whether you're not sighted. So there is a lot within London around that, so we can talk about that later if you want to or anything.
I was just going to chip in as well that we've heard lots of people in this group over the years talk about how golf is particular, or sports that involve, or any activity that involves things that are still being particularly challenging, and often things that involve something that's moving, like throwing and catching a ball or playing tennis, counterintuitively seeming to be more possible for longer. It's obviously not the case for everybody, but we do know that things involving that are moving often seem to be easier to perceive and to locate. And so I think the golf is a particularly frustrating challenge with a sort of static target.
And yes, there were a couple, I don't know if they're here today, but Lawrence could still, I think he could do badminton and table tennis. In fact, Dad hadn't tried that. But I thought it was really interesting, because I just thought that he wouldn't be able to do it. So I guess that's something we could try.
And I think that's why loads of people don't try, because it seems like logically you think, well, that's surely if it's moving, it's going to be even harder to find. And counterintuitively, I think that's not always the case.
Can I add something? I am at the back. My husband next to me, Phil, has PCA, and we haven't been along yet, but our local Alzheimer's Association, we live in Kent, so it's wonderful hearing about a lot of this stuff. I'm not sure we've got it, but we'll start working on it. But the Alzheimer's Society has a link up with the local sports centre for people with dementia, and apparently there's a range of activities, and you can go along and there are helpers and carers, and I, as a carer, I think can go off and do something separate, so it might be worth looking to see what you've got in your local area.
Just to follow up on the previous question, I'm a regular rower. I am old enough to know better, of course, but the rowing clubs are geared up now to take, and we have visually impaired rowers. Once you're actually sitting in a boat, provided you're not steering, then it's a repetitive movement, and people do get a lot out of it, if that's any help.
Cycling?
Yes, we have a
a track in Eastbourne.
Yeah.
And it's a running track which has been modified to take bikes.
Great.
And I do that every three-wheelers, obviously, not on a bike. But and it's very, very popular.
Fantastic.
Just add on top of that, quite a few tips.
Sorry.
You're in Oxford, we have people who go out and take you out to various parts, because it's all great talking about it, but if you can't get there, then that's really not worth it. So that happens in Oxford a couple of times, and it's really quite good. You see a lot of people having a great time.
Thank you.
Cycling.
Yeah. I think, Keir, did you have a question at the back?
Me?
Sorry.
Right.
Claire, you go.
When Dave's in the garden picking up beds, he likes hearing the birds sing. So I make sure the bird table is always stocked with seed, so we get lots of birds. So he does appreciate getting different birds in the garden.
I'm the happy tandemer, and I go with a group, with a friend supports, because I can no longer, I can't judge distance, and so it would be disastrous if I went out on a bike on my own. But I used to love cycling a lot, and it was a loss, but there's a charity that's in Coventry, which is, when I listen to all the things that are happening around the place, I do get a bit envious at times, because there's a lot of things that seem to happen in London, and then, then the range isn't quite there. But having said that, I do take on board what's been mentioned today, because I'm looking forward to going to some of these places that that I've talked about in terms of the arts.
So I was just going to add on to an earlier point that there's a centre in the Berkshire area where they do adapted physical activities for people who have, for example, coordination difficulties. I know that Helen Shepherd, who's the facilitator of the Wellcome meeting, has the details of it, so I can circulate them. But I think one example that stuck with me is they have something called kata canoeing, where you'll have, say, 2 canoes attached to each other, so people can still safely be, doing one of those activities, but still kind of supported by someone, but it's sort of like a strenuous physical activity.
I would say also that actually in Hertfordshire, at the Aquadrome in Rickmansworth, they have a sailing club on one of the lakes, and they train young children or anybody there, but they also have special days where you can take someone who has some form of a challenge, and it doesn't really make any difference what it is, because they even have hoists to get people into the sailboat. They have an experienced sailor who will take them out and sail them around on the lake for an hour. And I've been to watch this, and it was someone who was a very experienced sailor in his own right and had for many years sailed on the open seas, but he loved it. So I would check with anything in your local area where they may have sailing clubs, and I can't remember what the name of the group is that does this, but there are a lot of them that probably offer that type of facility.
Could I just backtrack on what Emma said about theatre, opera and so on? Activities Raina loved were theatre, etc. Now she has a big problem with access, walking along a row, which involves treading on everyone and dropping things over them. So we need to have an aisle seat always. So is there a central organisation, or does one have to approach every theatre and the opera house and so on for special assistants and carers seats?
I think it's certainly worth checking with the place you're going to, but I know that Bearing Foundation and the Alzheimer's Society produced a publication, I think, about accessible arts venues in the UK. Of course, as with every collection of information, it needs updating, but there certainly are at least some suggestions of places who are particularly well-minded to think about the needs of people living with different types of dementia. we can send that link round in the notes.
Two things. With the Ambassador Theatre Group, the ATG card, they deal with lots of different theatres, and they do actually have the link so that you can, if you go to them, you can register as a carer, and then you can get your concession tickets. And on the other thing with the sports, in South Gloss we have the active leisure centres. That's where Lawrence plays his badminton and table tennis. They offer a group every single Monday, and it's laid on by the leisure centre. They are trying to roll it out across the whole of South Gloss for their 5 or 6 leisure centres. So it might be worth, if you know, approaching your own leisure centre and putting them in touch with Yate Leisure Centre. And Mike Jones there is really interested in rolling out his programme to other people.
Great. Can I just say, on the topic of where things are available, of course there's no perfect system. The best or least worst system we've come across so far is the Alzheimer's Society's Connect system, where they, I think it's called Dementia Connect, and you can type in your postcode and see what's available in your area. And of course, like with any listing, a few things can be out of date or links can be broken. But I think it's a good thing for us to use, for example, with the notes that Millie's taking, all of these good ideas, we can go away and check that they're on that system, and if they're not, we can put them on. And one other thing we're looking to do is to partner more with the Alzheimer's Society's Dementia Advisor Network. So the Alzheimer's Society have, I think it's now 834 dementia advisors around the UK. And we're going to try and have one of those dementia advisors come work with us, so we can train all of them, but particularly this one person up in the needs of people with different types of dementia, like PCA, so that we obviously won't have the local information for Berkshire or Northamptonshire or wherever you live, but if we can partner with someone who does know a colleague who works there, they're much more likely to be able to have that local information. So it's a problem it's really worth addressing. We can't solve it perfectly, but I think there are ways in which we can improve access and awareness of what's available in different places.
Yes, I'm Robert, and my wife, aged 68, entered a nursing home in May because her ability to manage became more and more compromised. So she went into a nursing home which is not specifically for patients with dementia. And I was initially just happy to let the nursing team and the carers get on with it until 5 weeks in, I couldn't understand why she was still sitting in a chair, effectively isolated. She had a propensity to stand up and then slide to the floor, so she was on a pressure mat to indicate when she was on the move. And on week 6 I went in and she'd been moved to sit with other residents, and it occurred to me that the nursing staff were ignorant of PCA. They'd not come across it before. And so I thought, how am I going to manage to get them to understand why she can't see where the cup is to drink, where the food is on the plate to eat? And Emma very kindly sent me some leaflets and the business size cards. So they were liberally distributed around the care staff in their restroom, on her case notes, on her file in the bedroom, and when they care for her doing personal care, I've encouraged them to understand what PCA is and the limitations, and specifically I've managed to run a training session showing the film that was shown at the conference, which I found immensely beneficial. And I was also surprised because she's now had a new community support nurse replace the previous nurse, and he had no knowledge of PCA at all. So to me, it's how you've developed strategies or workarounds. It's to try and promulgate the fact that the condition exists and its limitations, and that she's not blind, she just can't process what she's seeing.
Hi, I'm Diane Wadsworth. I'm also a rehabilitation officer working with people with visual impairments. I just wanted to say, although it's not an actual sight problem, but it's the cognitive side that causes the sight loss, one of the things that a rehabilitation officer can help with is exactly what was mentioned then about in care homes, because it is about maybe educating staff, but it's also looking at lighting and contrast and certain bits of equipment that might help, but also certainly making all staff aware of some of the issues. And most areas, either the local authority or it will be contracted out to a voluntary society, will have rehabilitation officers in their area. And certainly they should be able to, at the very least, give advice and information, or possibly would even take on that case and work with the home. I mean, Emma has our contact details, so if you're not able to find a rehabilitation officer in your area, we could certainly try and find out for you if there is one. But they could certainly help with some of that, so you're not having to try and do it all yourself and think of all the ideas yourself.
Hello. We had a Rovie come out and to help with Dave, and he'd never heard of PCA or anything like the condition. He was trying to suggest using Braille. He got no idea at all about what to do about it, and we had to tell him what PCA was. So I think there's a lot of education needed.
My name's Sue Tokley. I'm here with my husband John. I just wanted to mention Yo-Yo, which is a carers and people affected by dementia group that runs in North London. It's usually, most of the events are in Crouch End, and it's been set up by the carers and their partners, and it's been running, how long has it been running now? 4 or 5 years? Yeah. I think you may know of it. You can find information about it online under North London Dementia Support, I think. But it runs every month, every week, and then every month there are different activities, and so on a Monday there's a walk around London somewhere, various things that happen like table tennis and that sort of thing, yoga. And although it's not specifically for people with PCA, there are a number of people in the group who do have PCA, but it's been set up and organised by people themselves with a little bit of support from Dementia Pathfinders.
Great, thank you.
And if people are interested, they could come and talk to me or Val, because we're looking for new people to join.
Great. Thank you, that's really helpful. And I think that's a really good general point as well about how many general opportunities there may be out there which may not be designed for people with PCA, but where if one of our number finds that they are appropriate or are a good fit, then let's tell each other about them in case they're relevant for other people. I was chatting with Rosemary, who's here for the first time earlier, and who was saying, I hope you don't mind me sharing, Rosemary, an experience lots of people have said about going to an Alzheimer cafe and sort of looking around and finding that what you're after and what the people there are after doesn't sort of mesh. So I guess in situations like with Yo-Yo, or other organisations where you walk in and you do feel at home, or do feel that the shape of the place you are fits the things you're after, then, as I say, let's share it, because it may be relevant to other people in the group. We'll send round the notes from today with all the information. The best schedule we found is this thing, as I mentioned, on the Alzheimer's Society website called Dementia Connect. That's the most detailed sort of listing of where and when that I've come across. But we always need to be improving it and checking it. Yeah.
If I could return just for a moment to the visual rehabilitation officer. We live in North Yorkshire, and we had a visit from our officer just a couple of weeks ago, and I gave him the information I'd got about PCA and the stages of PCA, and I also emailed him the links to the visual support conference that we had in June, and he'd gone away and he had studied those, and he came back and he said how helpful they'd been, and he's been absolutely marvellous at suggesting things that would be appropriate for Graham.
Great. I think it's coming up a few times about different health professionals maybe not being familiar with PCA, and obviously it is a rare thing, but that if we can find accessible ways to quickly introduce people to who are busy people and don't have a lot of time, if we can find ways to introduce them to what to expect and what support people might need, then that's really valuable. And that we'll come back to that in a bit, actually, because that really ties into an initiative we're going to try, and which we would really need your help with. So bear all these fantastic professionals you have in mind, please, for that.
Jeff and then Laurie.
A few things I'd like to just pick up on. First of all, what you said about Alzheimer's Society with their groups and things. I think you might find they're going to start running them down and handing them over to other voluntary organisations like Age UK. Certainly in Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire, they've stopped doing all their groups, but they are still running. That's my first point. The second point is picking up on what I've been talking about with music. I volunteer for a singing group and a music therapy group, and whatever people with dementia can't do, they can sing. And if anybody wants to see a little video of people singing with dementia, I've got some on my phone, so if they want to catch me at lunchtime, I'm quite happy to share the photos. But my philosophy is that everybody can do something, and it's important for people with dementia of any sort to get out and meet other people with similar conditions and have a bit of fun, because music to me is the thing that anybody with dementia can do. They can sing, they can shake a tambourine, they can bang a drum, and it's fun. People enjoy it and they look forward to going. And I volunteer for a group in Watford. They also run groups in other places in Hertfordshire and in Luton, but it's they used to say laughter's the best medicine, but for somebody with dementia, it's music is the best therapy.
So you're ticking both boxes there.
Hi, I'm not sure. Hello. I wouldn't have said this actually, but Michael just whispered to me, so I think it's okay to, I don't want to sound like I'm plugging Arts for Dementia, but Michael just whispered to me how he thinks their website has a lot of information on it, and not only do they give things, they do things that are amazing, like all summer, every Thursday, they would take couples out on canal boats in Camden and have an opera singer sing while people were on canal boats. Right now, there's a long waiting list, but the Royal Opera House is giving 8 weeks of lessons to couples with dementia, ballet lessons, and it's going to end with a private showing of the Nutcracker. But that's going to run again. But have a look, because Arts for Dementia also tries to list a lot of things that might be of interest to you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Laurie. So that's all the discussion we have time for now, but Laurie and I will be continuing this discussion about activities as one of the smaller discussion groups after lunch, so please do join us there. And just to draw on what Tim was saying about how all of these things we're talking about are really great if you can actually get to them, it would be really nice as well in the conversation after lunch, and for the benefit of people who might be not here and not able to get here today, if we can also talk about some home-based things you can do at home as well, or strategies that people have come up with there. That would be great to hear more about. Seb has a couple of reminders before we break for lunch.
Thank you. So yes, after lunch we'll be breaking into 4 smaller groups, and if one of those groups happens to be big, we may have to subdivide further, so we'll see. But the group that Emma and Laurie will be leading, the continuation of this discussion will be through off the lunch area on that side of the building. And yes, I do realise the ridiculousness of me waving my hand in front of people living with PCA and expecting you to know where to go, so I apologise, but we will be milling around. But basically in the lunch area, on the side that faces into the building, will be the discussion with Laurie and Emma, continuing the activities theme from this morning. And on the opposite side in the lunch area, Katrina will be leading a small discussion about the legal advice service. Katrina, would you like to just come and say a couple of words about who you are and your centre?
Thank you, Seb. As mentioned, my name's Katrina. I'm a lawyer at the UCL Integrated Legal Advice Clinic. We're run as part of the law faculty at UCL, and we run an advice clinic out in Stratford in East London, where we offer free advice to the community, mostly in social welfare law, so housing, care, welfare benefits and things like that. And we have student volunteers that come and work with us as part of the project. So we were delighted when Seb got in touch with us earlier in the year to ask if we could run a legal advice project with the dementia support groups, which we're starting next month. So we're going to be offering one-off advice sessions to members of the support group as part of the pilot project we're going to start. It's not restricted in the type of legal query you have, so we'll be offering Skype advice sessions or in person if you are able to attend in London, followed up with a letter of advice, hopefully with some next steps you can take on and provide you with some guidance on the legal issue that you have. We're going to have law students helping us run the project as well, so they will be assisting us with research and attending the advice sessions with us. So if you're interested or want to find out more, please do come to the discussion group after lunch.
And so it's as Katrina mentioned, it's a pilot session, but that will be, you can access that through Emma and I. So if you have a particular legal query, if you come to us, there'll be a brief description form where you can outline what the challenge is, and it may be that the guys, Katrina and her team, can answer that very quickly, or for more complex queries that they have one of these face-to-face or voice-to-voice sessions. So, okay, so that's 2 of the sessions after lunch. The third session is that I'll be answering any general questions about PCA, clinical care and management. If you're here for the first time and want to find out what PCA is, that's the kind of thing we'll be talking about. And I'll be based kind of around here near the screen. And then just at the back of this room, the 4th discussion group will be led by Roberta. And Roberta will be talking to you a bit more about our plans to develop the Rare Dementia Support Service, so this support group and the similar support groups we run for people with other rare forms of dementia, and particularly some interesting and rather exciting plans we have to create and build a new home for the support group meetings once we eventually leave Wellcome, and the ways in which we want to improve the service through partnerships with people like dementia advisors and admiral nurses, so we can really enhance the care and advice that we can, and the frequency of the advice that we can give you. So very brief recap. At the back of the room where you're having sandwiches will be the discussion about legal advice, and all the discussion continuing about activities. And in here will be general clinical PCA questions and the development of the service. For now, though, unless there are any... Oh, yes, sorry, one last thing. Do you want to...
So as we were saying about professionals that you may have come into contact with who are really familiar with PCA, Greg and Diane, I'm looking at you, as part of this as well. Michael, who Seb introduced earlier, is going to hopefully help us make some videos that we could show to professionals, people from their own profession, explaining briefly things to look out for with PCA, things you should be aware of, things I've had to do differently than I would usually do. So if you know of any really good professionals that you've come into contact with, we have a list of the sorts of people we're thinking about. We have these handouts on the Rare Dementia Support table at the back where you'll pass on your way to lunch. So if you have anyone in mind, or you just want us to contact you to find out about your recommendations, please do fill one of these in and hand it to one of us. That would be great.
So Jeanette, who is wearing a white jacket and waving at you now from the back of the room, will be manning that table. So if you would like to go and share any details of those clinicians or professionals with Jeanette, that would be great. I thought we'd maybe finish where we started with Laurie. Laurie, if you're happy to share your last little story, which seemed very relevant and which has already been chimed by another member of the group, about the value of sometimes you're in a situation with a professional who, by all rights, or at least in an ideal world, would know what PCA is and would know how to adapt their usual support and care to suit your needs. But frequently it's not the case. So we can either get frustrated about it and wish that everyone was trained about PCA, but that's never going to happen, or we can equip you with short videos or links or advice that you can show that professional to get them into the headspace where they understand. And I think the closest we've got so far is with Simon Ball's animated film, which a number of you were part of, and just wanted Laurie to finish the session with an example of how, in a particular clinical situation, that was really helpful.
I'm sure you've all seen the film, or I hope you have. Do you see what I see? The film illustrates how we feel that John and others see with PCA. Simon Ball created and illustrated the film. I believe that Simon has done a brilliant job in his interpretation through his illustrations especially. In May, John was in St. George's Hospital in London with pneumonia. As he was recovering, I noticed that his chart was marked that he was always declining his meals. It turns out he didn't see the meals that they would leave in front of him, even though I had repeatedly told the staff that John had Alzheimer's and the variant PCA. It didn't really sink in that if they put a cup of tea or a meal in front of him, that he might not actually see it. How could that be? They didn't understand, because he could see them. How could he not see this? So they kind of brushed me aside. Luckily, the film came out while John was in the hospital, and I was so desperate as John started to lose weight, I showed it to the head nurse, who in turn showed it to the staff and the doctors on the ward. They were very grateful, and a doctor personally came to me to thank me for the film. It reminded them that all Alzheimer's is not the same. I also used the film for the care home where John was at the end of his life, and to share with friends of ours so they could understand further what John was experiencing. With very few words, I think that this film speaks volumes. Use it in any way you can.
Thank you. So we need more resources like that, that when you're in a difficult situation, you can share it and the person will be able to move closer to where you are and closer to an understanding of the needs that you have. Jeff, I'm going to hold your question, if I may, just till after lunch. Okay. Let's break for lunch now. There are sandwiches and drinks through in the main room. Thank you very much for your contributions this morning.